2 Kings chapter 7, verse 1 to 20. And I'll read. Elisha said, "Hear the word of the Lord. This is what the Lord says. About this time tomorrow, a seah of flour will sell for a shekel, and 2 seahs of barley for a shekel at the gate of Samaria." The officer on whose arm the king was leaning said to the man of God, "Look, even if the Lord should open up the floodgates of heaven, could this happen? You will see it with your own eyes," answered Elisha, "but you will not eat any of it." Now there were 4 men with leprosy at the entrance of the city gate. They said to each other, "Why stay here until we die? If we say we'll go to the city, the famine is there, and we will die. If we stay here, we will die. So let's go over to the camp of the Arameans and surrender. If they spare us, we live. If they kill us, then we die." At dusk they got up and went to the camp of the Arameans. When they reached the edge of the camp, not a man was there, for the Lord had caused the Arameans to hear the sound of chariots and horses and a great army, so that they said to one another, "Look, the king of Israel has hired Hittite and Egyptian kings to attack us." So they got up and fled in the dusk and abandoned their tents and their horses and their donkeys. They left the camp as it was and ran for their lives. The men who had leprosy reached the edge of the camp and entered one of the tents. They ate and drank and carried away silver, gold, and clothes, and went off and hid them. They returned and entered another tent and took some things from it and hid them also. Then they said to each other, "We're not doing right. This is a day of good news, and we're keeping it to ourselves. If we wait until daylight, punishment will overtake us. Let us go at once and report this to the royal palace." So they went and called out to the city gatekeepers and told them, "We went to the Aramean camp, and not a man was there, not a sound of anyone, only tethered horses and donkeys, and the tents left just as they were." The gatekeepers shouted the news, and it was reported within the palace. The king got up in the night and said to his officers, "I tell you what the Arameans have done to us. They know we are starving. They have left the camp to hide in the countryside, thinking they will surely come out, and then we will take them alive and get into the city." One of his officers answered, Have some men take 5 of the horses that were left in the city. Their plight will be like that of the Israelites left there. Yes, they will only be like all the Israelites who are doomed. So let us send them to find out what happened." So they selected 2 chariots with their horses, and the king sent them after the Aramean army. He commanded the drivers, "Go and find out what has happened." They followed them as far as the Jordan, and they found the whole road strewn with the clothing and equipment the Arameans had thrown away in their headlong flight. So the messengers returned and reported to the king. Then the 2 people went out and plundered the camp of the Arameans. So a seah of flour was sold for a shekel, and 2 seahs of barley sold for a shekel, as the Lord had said. Now the king had put the officer on whose arm he had leaned in charge of the gate, and the people trampled him in the gateway, and he died, just as the man of God had foretold when the king came down to his house. It happened as the man of God had said to the king, "About this time tomorrow, a seah of flour will sell for a shekel, and 2 seahs of barley for a shekel at the gate of Samaria." The officer had said to the man of God, "Look, even if the Lord should open up the floodgates of heaven, could this happen?" And the man of God had replied, "You will see it with your own eyes, but you will not eat any of it." And that is exactly what happened to him, for the people trampled him in the gateway, and he died. Thus says the word of the Lord.
It's the late Dr. John Stott, a one-time chaplain to the Queen, who was addressing some group at Overseas Student Ministry Center. And he said this: "It is time for me now to doff the mantle of the historian and to don the mantle of the prophet. It's time for me now to remove the mantle of the historian and to put on the mantle of the prophet." This morning, I feel heavily like that it is time for me to kind of put on the mantle of a prophet as I remove the mantle of a pastor, if I am able to do that this morning. We've been looking at a series touching on various aspects of leadership, and more recently looking at things that are touching on a political issue, including leadership within the political issue and our relationship with those things that are going on within the leadership. We live in a time where individuals are challenged at personal levels, families are challenged within their setting, and we live in a time where a nation as a whole sometimes faces certain kind of challenges that does seem to not only bring heaviness upon us as individuals, but to cover the entire nation. In moments like this, what is required is for some men and women who would have an idea of what direction to go. Those who would be able to have the morals to make the right kind of decisions. And those who will be able to stand up and give direction, depending on not on their own strength or ability, but depending on the ability that God provides. And particularly as we look ahead towards the moment when we will be engaging in our elections, the whole question of what kind of moral fiber are we actually looking for? It is C.S. Lewis, that writer, in one of his books, The Abolition of Man, who refers to a category of people that he calls men without a chest. Men without a chest are those men who have intellect but no morals, who think but do not have hearts, who seems to engage but are not being motivated from their heart in order to do what is in the heart of God. And sadly enough, when it comes to issues of leadership, more often than not, we have men without a chest. Individuals who do not have the heart of God as to what God would want to do and the direction that God is moving us as a nation. Now, the narrative before us actually starts in chapter 6, verse 24, all the way to chapter 7, verse 20. We only read chapter 7, verse 1 through verse 20. But let me take you back a little bit to chapter 6, verse 24 through verse 33. This is the life of King Joram, one of the renowned kings as we started looking at his life last Sunday. And King Joram, who had a hate and love relationship with the Syrians or the Arameans, at some point had good relationship, at some points very, very bad relationship. And at this particular point, the Assyrians besieged the city of Samaria, which was the capital city of the northern kingdom of Israel. And they surrounded the city, not for 1 day, not for 2 days, not for 3 days, but for a long period of time, to the extent they ran out of supplies within the city. And at that particular moment, it seemed the entire nation was in a crisis because of this endless siege. They were facing a challenge. Several challenges are enlisted in chapter 6, verse 24 up to verse 33, if you are able to look there. They had food challenge. There was famine in the entire land. There was no hunger anywhere in the land. And not only was there no hunger anywhere in the land, even those who did have the money could not find it anywhere. And so there was a terrible economic meltdown to the extent a donkey's head would sell for 80 shekels of silver. And it is not because they were influenced by the Chinese so that they began eating donkeys. For them, donkeys were unclean animals. It was simply because there was no other food they could eat. So people would buy donkey's head, which to them was terrible. These were unclean animals, and be able to sell them for that amount of money. Not only that, we are informed that a quarter of a cup, this is some little container like this, of a dove's dung. Permit me to use Swahili here. Mafi ya ndege. I think it communicates better than English. A quarter of a cup was being sold for 5 shekels. And this was a delicacy then because there was no food at all. But it does seem like people who had access to these things, some people who still had donkeys, the haves, were taking advantage of the have-nots in this economic meltdown and taking advantage of them and selling these at exorbitant prices to the extent people could not afford them at all. This resulted in social disintegration in the entire country. We are informed that a time came when two women signed a contract together. And one of them said, today we will boil and eat my child, and then tomorrow we will boil and eat your child. And so they boiled the first child, and I assume they ate the child. And when it came the time to boil the second child, the other mother hid her child, broke the contract and hid a child. It is then that they turned to the king and began looking up to the king as this woman cried out, help me please, help me please. And the king did not know which way to take. A society that had broken down to the extent children could be killed without a second thought. A society that had broken down, that perhaps could point to our own society, where people would import fake medicine, knowing that this will be death sentence to some people without thinking about it. A society that has broken down, where there are assassins out there who would kill the innocent without thinking about it. A society that has broken down to the extent we truly would reflect the words of Julius Nyerere, man eat man society. It is in this context that a woman cries out to the king, help me please, help me please, help me please. And the king raises up his hands and says, if God cannot help you, what can I do myself? He had reached the end of his road. Political despondency, that is hopelessness, feeling caged in by the Syrians, and at the same time feeling helpless because he had run out of answers, feeling like there was a delay in God intervening. As a result of this, he said, the only person that is responsible is the prophet of God, Elisha. And today, we've got to separate his head from his shoulders. Murder, assassination of those who seem to be standing out as righteous. And these are sometimes reflections of societies that are facing challenges, reflection of generations, reflection of nations, reflections of some things that may be going on within our country. Woe to a nation when the leader runs out of solution. You've run out of finances, run out of food, run out of answers. And this is not only at the national level, but sometimes even at individual levels. We are faced with challenges and some situations where we are feeling besieged, where we are feeling hemmed in, where we are feeling caged and barricaded, where we are feeling like there is nowhere we can turn. It may be a family situation. It may be a children's situation. It may be a financial situation. It may be a habit that you are struggling with. It may be a substance abuse. It may be something that is happening to you round about you that has hemmed you in to the extent you are feeling caged in your circumstance and in your situation. You've never felt so alone. All the world seems to have forsaken you. In your mind, even God has forgotten you. It is these moments when you want to scream, stop the world, I want to get over. Have you forgotten me, Lord? Have you forgotten who I am? And the nation of Israel was passing through moments and times like that. It is this moment that Elijah comes in chapter 7, verse 1 through 2 that we read, with a glimmer of hope. And he comes and he makes a declaration saying the unthinkable. In essence, Elijah is saying, although there has been no hunger, tomorrow the kiosks at the gate will be selling a packet of hunger, which has been costing 80 shekel. It will only be going for 1 shekel. Tomorrow. Elisha is coming and is saying, you see the famine that has been ravaging the city for all this while, the famine is over. Elijah is coming in and saying, the Lord is going to turn the tide. It's going to be all right. He's saying things might have been tight a little while ago, but God is going to turn them roundabout. Things are going to get better. No wonder the man on whose arms the king leaned, when he heard Elisha making this declaration, he couldn't believe it. And he said, even if the windows of heaven were opened, that kind of miracle could not take place. Impossible. Impossible. To which the man of God responded, you will see it, but you will not partake of it. You see, sometimes God speaks in a situation. And God speaks in a situation because he would want to bring a solution. Because he would want to bring a change. And as we think of our nation in the moments like these, there are always men and women who are like this servant of the king. I call them the pessimists. I call them the people who see no good at all. I call them the doomsayers. I call them the men and the women who are seeing how Kenya is headed down the street and going to be destroyed. I call them the kind of people who do not have anything that they would think as something good coming out. They are suckers of energy and suckers of faith. They are people who discourage your prayers and make you feel like this country is going to be destroyed. This country is headed down a drainage. This country is going for a calamity. There is no worst pest like a pessimist. For a pessimist is like an individual who has swallowed a whole egg and is afraid to move because the egg might break inside, and is afraid to sit still because the egg might hatch within him. He doesn't know which direction to move. And as we move along the nation, I would want us to adopt, for the sake of our country, for the sake of our children, for the sake of our nation, a positive attitude that God is in charge of our land and our nation. Things are going to get better. He's going to raise us up. He's going to take us through every situation. It may have been a challenging time. Yes, the politicking may be going on. Yes, the temperatures may be rising, but we do know something here, that God is in charge. I pray that we may be able to see some good in our nations. I pray that we may be able to see a future of brightness. I pray that in spite of the saber rattling that some leaders are having, we may have a different mindset. That's not the way we are going. We are going an opposite direction. We are going the direction of unity. We are going the direction of oneness. We are going the direction that will bring forth fruit in the final end, because we are a people of God. But it didn't stop there. The man of God, after he had given his prophecy, is silent, and we have no idea how in the world is God going to answer this prayer or this word. Outside the city were some 4 men who were ostracized from the society. I would call them marginalized individuals. People who would not associate with those who are at the creme de la creme. People who would not associate with the society because of their physical condition. They were marked people, marked individuals. Marked because they had a skin disease that was contagious, and because they did not have ways of treating this. The only way of handling those people, lock them outside the city, keep them outside the city. It's strange how our problems tends to draw us together. And so these four individuals with similar problem developed a fellowship and a relationship where they began to talk with themselves. And they put three options that were before them. First option, let's go into the city. But they said, if we go into the city, we will die. And certainly they will die. They will not only die of hunger, but if people would see them, these are the leprous individuals that we have been keeping out of the city. Now they have come here to spread their disease. They would actually be stoned to death. And so they refuse. If we go into the city, we will die. The second option, let's stay where we are. But if we stay where we are, we will also die. The third option, let us go and join the Arameans or the Syrians. Let's go cross over and join the Arameans. But if we go there, we might also die. But there is also a possibility, a slight possibility, that we might live. It is in this moment that they decided to go over into the camp of the Arameans. These individuals who are ostracized. These individuals who are marginalized. These individuals who do not seem to have what it takes. These individuals whom you might say the rest of the societies would pass them by, would ignore them, would neglect them, would abandon them. These individuals became the saviors of the city by bearing or bringing in good news of what God had actually done. You see, brothers and sisters, in the city of Nairobi, there are spots that always have problems. If there is a problem in Nairobi, we know Kibera will have problems. We know Korogocho will have problems. We know Mathare will have problems. We know certain spots of the city will have problems. And that's why as a church, we have felt strongly that we need to engage with these parts of the city. You may not know as a church. But since October, we have been holding peace initiatives that started in Kibera, that are spread now and has touched actually 10 slum areas in the city. As I speak with you right now, we recruited individuals who are opinion makers. That's a polite word, as Pastor Mulandi is laughing. But individuals that we know have the potential to be used by others to cause chaos. We've recruited 38 of them from 10 slums. As I speak with you right now, they are on their way from Rwanda. We had sent them to Rwanda with some pastors to see what could happen to them. And this evening at 5, we are receiving them here, coming back. These people would go back there and become agents of peace, although they are coming from areas that we perhaps would think these are marginalized areas. These are areas where nothing can go on. Yet if they hold their peace, the entire city would have peace as well. And what does God do in order to bring a change? The Bible says the Arameans had the noise and the sound of military. And because they had some noise and sound of military, they ran away and fled, and they left everything there, their food stuff, their materials, and they fled. Now, some writers, Bible writers, says this. They allude to the fact that, and this is more fanciful than factual, they allude to the fact that as the four lepers were walking, going towards the camp of the Arameans, their footsteps was amplified by God and sounded like the footsteps of several chariots that is marching. And when these men heard, these men fled. As I said, not factual, not scriptural, not textual, but some writers tend to allude to that. But the extent of what happened was that they heard some sounds of chariots and armies, and so the Arameans fled and left everything where they are. Somehow, God had decided to honor himself, and he did not use please, the politics of King Joram. He did not use the arguments and the laws of some of his people. He did not use his military base in order to bring about this victory. He did not even use the negotiation with King Ben-Hadad of Aramean in order to bring about peace. God used the most strange things, a sound. He used a sound. And by using a sound, he was showing very, very clearly, I am not necessarily walking with King Joram. As you had heard, he had some difficulties with King Joram. I am not necessarily affirming King Ben-Hadad. I am doing things my own way. I want to ask you a question. How does God vote? How does God vote? How will God vote on the 8th of August? Will he vote for Abdullah? Abuda? Whatever his name is. How does God vote? And this is the word I want to bring to you, people of God. Hear me and hear me close. When God votes, he always votes for himself. When God votes, he always votes for himself. He is not attached to some individual that I will vote for so-and-so or I'll vote for so-and-so. And so as we are praying, God, because you have majority vote, please stuff the balloting box with your votes so that my candidate may win or the other candidate may win. That's not the way of God. When God votes, he always votes for himself. What is he seeking? He is seeking his glory. He is seeking his agenda. He is seeking his plan. He is seeking his kingdom purposes. He is not necessarily concerned about my temporary comfort. He is not necessarily concerned about my ethnic welfare. What God is concerned about is his kingdom first and foremost. So next time we are praying for our candidates, let's go ahead and pray. But can we pray and say, Lord, would you please vote for yourself in this election? Would you please vote for yourself? Sometimes you have confused our agenda for God's agenda. Sometimes you have thought that our preferred political party must also be God's preferred party. Sometimes we have reduced God to be an ethnic guru, standing with our community more than the global God that he is, the awesome God, the majestic God. Let's shift our idea. Oh, I need to end, but allow me to say something here as I end. Is it okay? Allow me to say something here. Now, these 4 individuals moved on to the camp of the Arameans. And when they reached the camp of the Arameans, what do they find? The camp is empty. There are no soldiers, but the goods and the booty and the loot is all there. What we have been waiting all along for, what we could not get outside the city. And so they began looting. This one would pick, they would go and hide. The other one would pick, and they would go and hide. And the other one would pick, and they would go and hide. You see, even those people who we think are different, sometimes it is simply because they have no opportunity. When they do get the opportunity, they go exactly the same rampage of looting and hoarding and exposing their soft underbelly of greed and avarice, showing that they too wanted everything like that. To quote Michelle Wrong's book on John Githongo, a book I would recommend you read if you can get a copy. I think it may not be in this country. It's our turn to eat. So even the leprous individuals, it's our turn to eat. It's our turn to eat. And so everyone comes and finds all these and they turn to eat. How else can we explain the fact that some governors with the salaries that we do know they're earning all overnight have become millionaires in 5 years? How else can we explain some MCAs who all of a sudden have acquired properties in neighborhoods that even some of senior company people cannot be able to acquire? It's our turn to eat. It's our turn to eat. Will it be different with the people that we are voting in, that we will have given them some ideas, but something needs to happen for someone to be different. Perhaps it is not the MCAs. Perhaps it is not the governors. Perhaps it is not the CSS. Perhaps it is not the PSS. But perhaps it is you in the company where you have access to some goods. Perhaps it is you in the civil servant's office. I will remember ever in my life this woman walking to me and he said, "Pastor, you see me, you see the way I'm dressed." And she was dressed neatly. She said, "Pastor, there is nothing that I want that my husband can't give me." The other day I passed by, there was a car on the yard, and I said, "That car looks nice." The following day, the car was at our doorstep. "Pastor, you need to see the house my husband is building." When I went there, I almost fainted. Then she turned to me with tears running down her eyes, and she said, "But Pastor, when I go to Chumi, and I'm pushing my trolley filled with articles, and then I see this person coming with a bag with sugar and bread only, I envy them. I envy them." So I said, "Why?" "I envy them, Pastor, because I do not know where my husband is getting the money from." The looting. And perhaps by extension, you have become a partaker. And may God help you. May God help me. Because something needs to happen. What happened? These people's consciences were pricked. And verse 9 declares to us, when their consciences were pricked, they said, we are not doing right. We are not doing that. Today is the day of good news. We are hoarding and looting for ourselves. When people are starving and dying there, we are not doing right. Let's go back and take the good news to the city. They became evangelists immediately. Bearers of good news of what God was doing, because they recognize and realize we cannot just continue to hoard. We've got to be able to take it out there. We've got to be able to share it with others. Politics is not just about policies. Politics is also about equitable distribution of resources that are available so that no one feels they are left out. My prayer is that members of Nairobi Baptist Church who are listening to the sound of my voice today would be bearers of good news. My prayer is that we'd go out there into the society with good news about our country, good news about what is happening, but increase that to good news about the kingdom of God, good news about the transformation and the change that has taken place, so that you are not just selfishly looking inward, but you are also looking outward to the welfare of other people as well, that God may make us bearers of good news as we move out there to bring transformation and change in our society. That we'll say we want to be different. We want to be different. God is calling you, God is calling me to be different bearers of good news. Because it is only then that we are affirming that we are actually on the side of God rather than on the side of individuals. Perhaps this morning you are hemmed in a situation where the circumstances are challenging you. Perhaps you are hemmed in a place where you're feeling, Lord, how do I get out of this? How do I move out of this? Perhaps it's a difficult moment for you. Even as I speak, you're saying, Pastor, my situation has not passed. Even that word from the Lord that tomorrow it will be different. Pastor, I wish it would be different for me. We want to encourage you to trust in the Lord. And we want to pray with you that the living God who is able to intervene not only in nations, because it's God who has the agenda of nation, but also in individual lives, in family lives, will come through for you and intervene for the glory and the honor of his name. I want us to pray together.